So for those of you that don't believe in dinosaurs, I want to show you something, and I don't necessarily know if I believe them either. I think that they were all possibly dragons. But I have some pretty damning proof for the existence of dragons, and it's found on Google Earth. So as you guys can see here, this is a petrified dragon. You can see its two horns. Immediately, one of them seems to have been maybe broken off with time, but then these nasty barbs that are coming up out of its back. Absolutely crazy. It then wraps around and comes all the way to here. This thing's got to be all of 300 feet. You can see the scaling on each side. And then watch this. As I continue to turn, boom, there's its tail. One of the best examples I've seen of petrified giants. I mean, look at the sheer size of this thing. There's its leg. See its leg? Amazing. Truly, truly amazing. There's one of its legs right there. The other must be buried in foliage over here. You can kind of see it right there. Its leg. And its other arm must be somewhere up in here. I mean, wouldn't it be just amazing to uncover that? There you go. There it looks like it might be its other arm, maybe down there. But nevertheless, what an amazing, absolutely magical creature right here. It's insane. I mean, there's no denying it. There is truly no denying it. What else would it be? What else would it be, y'all? Amazing stuff. Truly amazing stuff. I'm not sure what this is. God. I'm not sure. Possibly some sort of creature? Not sure. But yeah, wild, right? Absolutely wild. That blew my mind the first time I saw it. The evidence doesn't get much more damning than that, right? Crazy, crazy, crazy. Okay, let's get back to our videos here. This next video you will see is a gentleman in the wilderness who knows where to go to get Bigfoot to communicate with him, essentially. Call back to him. Take a listen.
Do the call again. That's us.
See, that sounds like a small one.
That sounds like a smaller one. It's not the same sound as a while ago.
Absolutely insane.
Y'all share this out. This will be your first Bigfoot calling. We've had them before, but never like this. We've never had them this active.
Not here, but I think we're picking them off. I think it's in our hunting area.
Yeah.
We're always going to get snatched up by Sasquatch and get some good Sasquatch love in here in a minute.
Thank you for the sunflower. Listen.
See, that's a bigger one.
That is a different. Oh, God. Listen. This is us.
That'd be wild, y'all.
Smoke too much. I like it.
Oh, listen. Did y'all hear that?
That's two at the same time.
That was two of them at the same time calling back.
What call are you doing?
Not exactly sure where this is.
Calling Roy, baby.
Getting closer.
We've never had this kind of activity, y'all.
I've had them call back to me and stuff before, but I don't usually do this when other people in the woods.
Hell, Roy's there, King. Might as well.
No. That's not Roy, y'all.
Hey, if
That's
the
not
people-
Roy. For the people think that's Roy.
There's Roy right
There's
there.
Roy right there. Do y'all see him? He's over
Oh, yeah,
talking
it's
to
definitely not
somebody on
him.
the telephone.
No, he's videoing.
Oh, he's videoing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's videoing.
I just let y'all know that it is not Roy doing that. Listen, even the dogs behind us are cutting up now.
There's a surprise at the truck, too.
Jeremy, it's really loud.
That was closer. Much
Does
closer.
everybody hear that? There is
You know what? I
definitely
think it's
a squatch.
I think they step in front of the camera so they can watch me do it and they see I'm not doing it.
Everybody, now this is us calling. And watch him.
Oh!
Alright, now listen. Does everybody hear that?
Sounds like one's running.
Somebody said something like you're getting closer.
It sounds like one's running.
Oh, crap. Oh, crap. Do y'all hear the dogs? Even the dogs are cutting up now.
Pretty awesome. I couldn't
No,
imagine.
it's definitely not a
experiencing something like that.
coyote.
Wild, y'all. Wild. So this is actually basically an orb, but it's basically glowing balls of fire. I think it's real. It seems real. The length of it makes it more authentic to me. It doesn't seem as short as AI footage. So take a look. So weird. And this, I believe, to be a real phenomena. They just seem kind of to float above ground, similar to a ball lightning scenario. Could it be elementals? Could it be aliens? It's truly hard to say. Seems to be a real phenomenon nonetheless. Some more. I think this is from the same general location, multiple different films. Crazy stuff, right? Okay, so this is actually Jake Rossmartin. And this is the gentleman that people are saying is a paid actor. I actually went, and if you look at his page, I don't know. He's a hell of a paid actor. But it is odd he's the only one posting. I find that very odd as well. So I guess it's up to you guys to go check his page out. You see his tag right there on TikTok. It seems really weird.
I normally wouldn't make a video like this, but I feel like I need to say something, so I wrote a few things down. I'm currently on board the MV Hondias, and what's happening right now is very real for all of us here. We're not just a story. We're not just headlines. We're people. People with families, with lives, with people waiting for us at home. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's the hardest part. All we want right now is to feel safe, to have clarity, and to get home. So if you're seeing coverage about this, just remember that there are real people behind it, and that this isn't something happening somewhere far away. It's happening to us right now. I'll share more when I can, but for now, I just ask for your kindness and understanding. Thank you.
This is the grim history gentleman I've been talking about. This dude's story, some of them, legendary. He's only got like 86K followers, so go give him a follow, but love his stories. This is the dog man, or the more or less, I believe, I'll call them werewolves. And it's about a gentleman who was a bodyguard for a super rich family that were very odd indeed. Take a look. Take a listen.
I thought I was guarding wealthy families until I realized why they never went out at night. So this story was sent to me by a follower named Adam, and he says he believes he unknowingly became the bodyguard to a family of werewolves. So he said after getting out of the
Crazy.
military, he got picked up by one of those alphabet agencies, and the kind he can't even really talk about or name, did a few years there, and then transitioned into the private sector of more high-end security. Well, it was more like high paying contracts, international work, and eventually he gets an offer in Spain. And it was for some elite family, old money family that ran generations deep. And his job was pretty much just being a daytime bodyguard. And he didn't really look at it as a red flag, but he found it odd at first. And a lot of guys that he worked with were actually working there. And he said that it paid far more than anything he had ever made, but the rules were extremely strict. And it was never be on the property after sunset, never ask about the lower levels of the estate, and no matter what you hear, if you're there at night, don't ever come back and just ignore it. And at first he thought it was just some eccentric rich people type of crap, but the estate was massive, he said, and it was old stone architecture, and parts of it looked like it had been there for centuries, and it was just really, really distant and far off. And he said the weirdest part was their schedule. The family never ever came outside during the day, not once at all. And he even joked that he thought maybe they were vampires. And everything was handled through staff, security feeds, or a brief controlled interaction indoors between him and the family. And he always noticed that when that did happen, the curtains were drawn. Then one afternoon, he saw something that he feels he truly wasn't supposed to. And one of the younger members of the family stepped into the strip of sunlight that was actually coming through a window. And he said they froze. Not like it hurt them like a vampire or anything like that, but it was almost as if they were afraid
They absolutely
of it. And
didn't
Adam
like
said
it.
that the kid slowly backed away, like the light was dangerous or it was going to make him explode. And the kid took off running. And that's when he said he started to pay
Very
attention a
weird.
little bit more to the family's story. Deliveries
Sure.
only came at dusk, security rotated out just before dark, and every single night, right after sunset, the entire estate would go completely dead silent. There were no lights, no movement, he said it was so dark you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. Until one night, he ended up staying a little too long. He got caught up on some work, he said.
Uh-oh.
And he said he broke the number one rule. And he said he finally
Yo.
saw what the family really was. And Adam said that night that he stayed late, it wasn't on purpose. It was a delay. It was a miscommunication, he said, and it was something small between him and one of the other security guards. And by the time that he realized it, the sun had already
Do you
gone
imagine
down,
it?
and the gates were locked. And at first, nothing happened. It was just, typical dark, silent, woody area. But he said the air was really, really heavy, and he said it felt like as if he was being watched. And then he heard it. It wasn't a howl. It was something far deeper, and it was guttural. And he said it was getting closer the more that it happened. And he said the breathing was
Whoa.
something unnatural. Like it was way too large, and it was slow, the breathing, like it was methodical. And he moved toward the main part of the building, and he was trying to stay calm, trying to rationalize it. I mean, this is a guy that's been in war zones we couldn't even imagine. And, thinking maybe it was wild dogs or something, but it wasn't. All
Yeah,
the doors
right.
were shut. And he swears that they were closed before, but from inside. And he started hearing movement inside. And it was heavy, slow footsteps. And it wasn't just one, it was more. And they weren't really walking. He said it sounded like when dogs pace and circle. And he said every instinct from the military had kicked in all at once. And, you are not the top of the food chain here, he realized.
Yeah,
and then
bruh.
something stepped in between the doorway. And it wasn't completely full. It was just enough for him to get a look. It was so tall, and it was bent in a way that a person really can't bend. And he said its eyes reflected in the light coming from the moon that was shining inside the house.
Whoa.
And it wasn't outside. He was inside, and then this thing, whatever it was, spoke to him. And he said it wasn't words, but it
What?
was something that sounded like it was trying to remember almost like how to speak. And he said at that moment, he just took off running. He didn't even look back. He didn't stop. He said he doesn't even remember how he got out. Just that the gates were suddenly open when he did reach them again. And remember, they were closed when he was there last time. And it was almost like they let him leave, he said. He quit the next morning, didn't argue, didn't ask any questions. But before he left, one of the older members of the family actually met him. And they looked completely normal. They were calm. And one of them told him that they appreciated his discretion. And most don't get the opportunity or the chance to choose it. Adam says he's seen things in the military things that he still can't explain, but nothing terrified him more than
Of
realizing
course.
those weren't security rules set in place for no reason.
Absolutely
They were warnings.
terrifying.
And the only reason he's still here is because something in that house that night decided that he was worth letting go. Whether
Sure,
they've
sure.
realized or they felt that he was a good asset or a good employee, or
They
they
saw his
realized that it
soul.
was truly an
Good
accident
man.
why he was there. But he says
He
that
was
that
an
was the
accident
night
too.
he realized that he was the bodyguard to an elite family of werewolf bloodline.
An elite family of werewolf bloodline, y'all. Come on. You gotta love that shit. I fucking love it. Great story. That's one of the best. He's told some really good ones. And actually, like I say, the one that you heard me tell at the beginning of this video is the same creator, Grim History. So this is obviously not Grim History. This is Ashley Inc. All of her stories are sent in by followers, and she's got some of the best on TikTok. If she's right up there with the top as far as the lore, the legend, the, exotic, the stuff that most people don't want to believe. She gets great content. Does a great job. So Ashley Inc. Give her a follow.
Did you know that since the 1990s, there have been claims about an underground pyramid known as the Dark Pyramid that supposedly exists underneath a military base in Alaska, and it's supposedly linked to secret government experiments, but archaeologists have sworn that there is zero proof that this place actually exists and that any claims coming out about it are purely misinformation. That's my disclaimer, but I thought it was an interesting introduction to a story I received for Spooky Scary Storytime from someone named Kaylee, who says she grew up in Alaska and her dad was a government contractor who worked underneath a base in Fairbanks, and the base is very real. I can verify that much. Of this story, I cannot. Keep in mind, Spooky Scary Storytime is a series of listener-submitted stories that can come from anyone. And while all the people who submit their stories claim that these stories are true, I can't verify, so let's just keep in mind that this is for entertainment only. Haley says as she grew up, her dad often made comments about these underground levels at the base where he worked, and she never really thought anything of them other than they were just generally spooky until years later when she was working at a bar, and a man walked in who made comments at her questioning everything her dad told her. So we'll start at the beginning. Initially, Kaylee's dad repaired electrical systems for remote, dense sites. That's what he told everyone his job was. The family lived outside of Anchorage for a while and then moved closer to Fairbanks, but there were long periods while her dad was working this job that he would disappear for long stretches at a time.
Y'all have heard about the pyramid, the Black Pyramid in Alaska that's underground.
No phone calls and no explanations. And when he would return, he would be exhausted. Not normal tired, but like completely drained. He would jump at slight noises. He was unable to sleep unless there were blackout curtains taped up on all the windows, and he hated tunnels, like genuinely panicked around them. Haley says when she was 11, she remembers they were driving near a construction site into a parking garage that was underground, and when her father saw the ramp leading off the street level down, he pulled the truck over and started having a panic attack, and he made a comment to her about there being places underneath this country that people were never supposed to dig. The panic attack in this comment scared Kaylee almost to the point of tears, and she remembers her mother screaming at her father about saying things like this in front of her daughter. Dad got back in the truck, apologized to Kaylee, and she said this was generally just the pattern with him. He would say things that sounded insane and then shut down and refuse to elaborate. The older she got, the more she realized that there were inconsistencies with his job. For instance, he never wore uniforms with any type of logo on them, and his ID badge was his name with a simple black barcode. He returned from 1 month-long work trip with 2 perfect surgical scars on identical parts of his forearms. They were perfectly straight lines, but he claimed that they were the result of an accident that he had on the job. But the most strange habit that he had was his habit of checking vents. Everywhere they went, hotels, restaurants, movie theaters, he would stare at the air vents for way too long.
So
The night
odd.
shortly before his death, when Kaylee was a little bit older, her dad was letting loose a little bit. He had had a little bit too much to drink, and he told her there were certain places in Alaska that weren't on paper. And she's like, "You mean like bunkers?" He stared at her dead serious, and he says, "No, way further down." He said that there are levels that go miles down, and the public that knows about them thinks that they're storage facilities or radar stations. Then he tells her something that genuinely terrified me. He said, the elevators that go miles down have armed guards inside of them. Outside the elevators, inside the elevators, and once you pass a certain depth, nobody's allowed to travel alone. And sometimes during routine maintenance shifts, they would hear what sounded like animals behind the walls. He said it wasn't machinery, it was scratching, it was breathing, it was movement. He told her, whatever is down there, they built walls around it instead of removing
breathing,
it.
movement.
He said, well, what is it?
They built walls around it instead of removing it, guys. Register that for a second. They built walls around it instead of removing it. What could that be? Scratching.
And he completely shut down and refused to continue the conversation. He changed the subject. And the next morning when he woke up, she asked him about it again, and he refused to talk about it. He pretended he had no idea what she was talking about. He was like, we never had that conversation. No matter how much she
Come
tried,
on,
she couldn't
man.
get him to elaborate, but she continued thinking about what he said. And after he passed, she started going down the rabbit hole. And that's how she found out about the Alaska Pyramid. So supposedly the conspiracy is
Yup.
that the government found it during the Cold War when they were doing experiments, but it's a massive black pyramid that apparently existed before modern civilization. People say that it
Okay.
emits frequencies, others say that it interferes with technology, and other people write it off entirely as internet conspiracy. You know, she can't find any
Like
verifiable
always.
proof that this place exists. It's just conspiracy. So she doesn't really think about it. She tries to put it out of her mind. She's like, I'll never really know, until years later. She's bartending near Anchorage. It's a slow night. It's a snowstorm outside. It's near closing time when this older guy walks in. He's like late 50s and he's wearing this heavy gray jacket and he looks completely exhausted. And it reminded her of how her
Crazy.
dad used to look when he would come home from month-long work trips. She said, I can't explain it other than it looks like this person has not slept in months. Sat at the bar, ordered bourbon, and they get to talking about work. And he asks her why she's still open so late in the middle of a snowstorm. And she says, it's okay, we're getting close to close anyway, but at least I'm not stuck working underground somewhere, you know? Man completely freezes and he's like, who told you about the underground? And she laughs and she's like, oh, it's okay. My dad used to work as a contractor on a base in Fairbanks. Guy just stares at her and it actually creeped her out. And he says, did your dad ever mention the medical wing? She says she felt
The
sick because
medical
her dad
wing.
had mentioned it to her only once when she was about 16. And he had mentioned that there was a sealed level underground. People in respirators worked. And if the alarms went off, the elevators sealed automatically. Nobody in, nobody out. And she tells this man what her dad had said. And she's like, do you know anything else about it? And he leans forward and he looks around, even though there's no one else in the bar. And he says, yeah, I just got out. Didn't say retired, didn't say got off a job,
What?
says got out like he's talking about a prison. He goes, out of where?
Just
And he says
broke
the lower
out.
levels. Says, did your dad ever tell you that we're not allowed to wear watches down there because the time doesn't behave normally? He laughs like he's not expecting her to believe him anyway. He says, yeah, there's sealed blast doors with no labels on them. And sometimes guys would come up after working 12 hours and they would be convinced that weeks had passed. He mentions the sounds and he says, and you can hear
Whoa.
them through the vents at night. He said immediate chills
The
because this brought her
vents.
back to the conversation that she had had with her own father. He goes, who is them? And he laughs again and he says, I don't know, but they sound human when they're far away.
They sound human when they're far away. What in the world? They sound human when they're far away. That one's getting me, guys. Usually I have some sort of inkling as to what it could be, but I am completely... They sound human when they're far away.
At this point, she just wanted this man to leave. She was genuinely creeped out and she didn't want him to tell her anymore. But eventually he did pay. He got up after his one drink and he was about to head out and he turns around and he said, did your dad ever mention the armed guards in the elevators? He says, yeah, he did. And he goes, did he ever tell you why? He says, no. And he says, well, it wasn't to keep people out. He walks off into the night. Interaction was spooky, but again, what can she make of this? A couple days go by. She's at home. She's been off work for a couple of days. When her phone rings, she answers. It's her bar manager. He sounded weirdly tense. He goes, was there some weird guy in here the other night talking about a government base? He goes, oh yeah, plays dumb. Doesn't mention the conversation that she had with him. And she's like, why, what's up? And he's like, well, there's two
How'd
guys
she
that
even
just
do
came to the
that?
bar and they were looking for him.
How dumb do you gotta
police?
be?
And he's like, no, they were definitely some kind of military, parkas and clean cut, you know. All they asked was whether the man had discussed classified information with anybody from the bar. So her boss says, I need to know exactly what he said to you. And she says, he just mentioned the lower levels and some armed guards. Manager says, I was afraid you were going to say that. And she goes, why? And he says, well, they specifically asked if he had mentioned the lower levels. And the manager asked them for identification. They just told him that they were with the Department of Energy and left. Even stranger, weeks later, possibly coincidentally, Kaylee's apartment was broken into. And all that was rifled through was the boxes that she had of her dad's things. He said, I didn't have anything of
my
his that would have
God.
been considered classified information anyway, but it was strange because nothing was missing. It was just like someone had broken into my apartment while I was at work, rifled through the things looking for something, didn't find whatever they were looking for, and left without taking anything else. So, anyone have
Wild.
any thoughts as to what's actually going on down there? Again, keep in mind this is for entertainment purposes only. I cannot prove the validity of this story. Have a spooky scary story time that you think nobody would believe, or one that you've just been holding on to for a little bit too long, send it in. We would love to hear it.
What is down there, guys? Help me out. I want to see some comments and some suggestions on what you believe. They sound human when they're further away. Is it something like hybrids, experiments gone wrong, reptilians, crossbreeds, a chimera? What is it, guys? What is it? Let me know in the comments. This next gentleman, though, what he explains about consciousness and about the fractal reality, this is about to blow your friggin' mind. I promise you. Take a listen.
So Epstein, he buys up all these scientists. They get laid off down there in New Mexico, and he buys them all up and he starts hiring them, and he does it for edge.org. What they're trying to do is they're trying to solve the psychoid layer. The psychoid layer is like where you know the world is magic. Like, you know this is a realm of God. But you forget, and you go back to work to make money, to pay the bills, and you get into the toil of things, but you really know that it's a spiritual realm.
The psychoid layer. Interesting.
But they know it's a spiritual realm. They don't have a secondary thing. They already have all the money, so they're just figuring out what the psychoid is. So the way that they would try to solve the psychoid is through the wave interference pattern. The wave interference pattern is where they shoot these electrons through these two slits. And as you observe the electron, it stays in physical form. But if you're not observing it, the electrons turn into waves, and the waves can split between slits, and whenever they go through, they bounce off each other, and then those waves bounce and those waves bounce, and it causes a wave interference pattern. That's not
It's basically like when you're not looking at the table, is it really there?
not exact, but that's the basics behind it. Because I don't want some asshole telling me, let's roll this slightly this. I know what it is. Because the reason I know what it is because that's what they're studying, and they're studying the way that these fractal patterns happen in reality. And once you understand that, you kind of can understand that money isn't real. It's an illusion. I mean, you believe it's real, but really it's energy, and it's these little energy bubbles that exist beyond the veil of consciousness. Beyond the veil are energy bubbles, and in the energy bubbles, they have modalities, and these modalities have codes that are not changeable. But you can project onto them through these waves and call it a submodality, which slightly changes
Submodality.
the energy. So you're broke, you're poor, you have money, you don't have money. It's not real. And try your best. Something happens. That's the way it is. That's why you have $10,000 and you're like, saved it up. Whoops, the motor blown up. I have zero. Because it's energy.
Interesting. Energy.
It's a flow of energy. So they want to solve that, and they also want to solve the translatory language beyond the Yoganandan dialect, this language that gets spoken, grunts and symbols from the ancient times.
So listen to this again.
Solve that, and they also want to solve the translatory language beyond the Yoganandan dialect, this language that gets spoken, grunts and symbols from the ancient times.
What does that remind you of? Yoganandan dialect. Grunts and symbols that are spoken, but the language is from ancient times. Bigfoot. That is what Bigfoot's speaking. What he mentioned right there, I believe, could be what Bigfoot is saying or speaking. Grunts and noises that represent symbols from ancient times. That's exactly what Bigfoot does. And if you listen to Bigfoot on the Sasquatch Ontario YouTube channel, there are moments where that thing is speaking in such a way that it almost seems to break into reality. Like it almost seems to sound in a manner outside of reality. It's insane. And when he said that Yoganandan language and the grunts and stuff, that's Bigfoot. It sounds it's gotta be.
Which form onto these modalities symbols that have entanglements, and those entanglements have emotional charge and all this stuff. And it's too much for the human mind. Like, you can see it happening, you can watch it happening, and people can walk along with me and they'll be like, oh my God, that's freaking, no way that you could do that, no way. But it's just because it's just really obvious. It's really obvious. That's why I think that they're doing the aliens anyways, because if they start tampering with this stuff, you're going to see some weird stuff happening, you know? Obviously, some weird things are going to happen if somebody's messing with that kind of stuff. We already had CERN. We already have the Mandela effect. And that can be explained pretty easily through neurolinguistic
coding. Brain, neural.
If you start tampering with the neurolinguistic code of the universal mind, it's the dialect. If you touch the dialect slightly, you could transform. When you change the neurolinguistics, you don't just change the moment. You change what the moment has always been.
What the moment has always been, hence the Mandela effect. Jiffy. It was always Jiff or Jiffy, whichever one it was. But then it changed the moment that has always been by tapping into CERN, alternating reality, splitting Higgs boson or Higgs boson, God particle, stuff like that.
And what it will be in the future. And you can just alter those things. It's just, I sometimes think maybe that's what when Jesus could see it, he already could tell. He knew it. He already knew he was in the psychoid all the time because he knew he was in the psychoid. So he didn't have an illusion of a false world. He was just in the psychoid. So you would just touch on these waves. Each wave is bumping
Jesus was tapped into the psychoid.
onto each other, causing the pattern of another wave, which bounces on and causes another wave. You could just add certain submodalities to these waves. So submodalities like a table. A table exists, but whenever I said the word table, you thought of a certain table. So I'm saying it must be a table, but you're saying it could be many types of tables. So the type of table is the submodality. So the modality could be hair. Hair, what type of hair exists? But you project onto it what type of hair it is, long or short, and that is a reflection of your inner psyche speaking to you,
Telling you.
in accordance with the entanglements of your emotional life. Your emotional life is entangled with physical reality through this and projected onto the modality in the form of a submodality. And that,
Wow. Let's listen to that again, folks. This is one you got to watch multiple times to really, really grasp it.
emotional life is entangled with physical reality through this and projected onto the modality in the form of a submodality. And that's just the way it really is. And it's super complicated to say,
But
if
it's
you just
simple.
see it, you just go, yeah, it's right there. It's freaking obvious. It's like you could look at a picture and see. I always think of it like when we used to dream, we look back in our mind and we're dreaming and we're thinking and we're talking to God, we're talking to the universal mind, and we're dreaming a world, But now when you dream, when you have problems, when you're solving problems, when you have a problem, you look into your phone and you put the problem into your phone and you project.
Yep.
And the recorder of that is no longer the universal mind. It's
Sure.
the AI. That's probably a lot of shit. All right, thanks for watching. Just one long video. You guys can let me have one long video, right?
I'm not sure who this guy is. Anybody who can figure out, I haven't really looked into it heavily, but please comment who that gentleman is, and if you could send a link to his page or comment a link to his page. Definitely worth listening to. Hope you enjoyed, though. Stay in love, stay in the light, be kind to others. Out.